everyone, your godmother's here, and I warned you we were going to nerd out for Women in Horror Month. So I have a very, very special guest, Ygraine Hackett-Cantabrana, and I'm going to allow her later to explain how you can continue to follow her. And she has the most fabulous, fabulous life. Like I wish I were her. Although right now it's funny where I am and not where she is. So I guess that's a thing. We're gonna sort of be dancing around a book. So we'll probably end up editing this out, but hopefully we'll be able to see the cover.
Mhm.
And I will put in the chat the link to the book, which is Mirror Mirror Reflections from Women on the Horror Genre. How appropriate is this book for Women in Horror Month? And why I invited Ygraine on? Well, I invited her for many reasons. Number one was that I just missed her. I haven't spoken to her in a long time. But I also wanted to talk about this idea in your essay, Ygraine, The Mother Hunger of Horror
Mhm.
site. And see, we're getting really nerdy. Like this is getting really scholarly. You cite Kelly McDaniel's Mother Hunger, how adult daughters can understand and heal from loss, nurturance, protection, and guidance. So you took from her research, and you said the lack of a loving and nurturing maternal figure in a woman's life, whether it be from death, addiction, or toxic abuse, can cause significant trauma. And then this idea of mother hunger, and I'm oversimplifying this, is that adult who lack that maternal nurturance has this void that they're trying to fill, or a hunger that they're trying to fill. And we're going to sort of relate this to horror films. And in many films we're going to discuss, the mother is not only sort of like the monster or the bad guy or the bully, she's also a victim herself of trauma and grief and neglect, and she's passing on this intergenerational curse. And we see that in real life too, right? As well, people can be both bullies and victims at the same time. And in a lot of the films, one thing that occurred to me as I was rereading your essay and thinking about films was how these films, if you remove the horror aspect, like the supernatural aspect of it, you'd still have a film like this. You could just on that, like Mother Hunger, that entire film itself. And so you began your essay talking about Frankenstein, and I love that you brought in Mary Shelley's biography, because I feel like her childhood and her marriage to Percy. I mean, if I could go back in time and be like, girl, you don't marry Percy Shelley. You know what I mean? Like, have an affair with him. You don't marry him. But anyway, I felt like childhood and her marriage to him was a template for Frankenstein, definitely. Is there anything you wanted to talk about with Frank? I have my Frankenstein mug here right now too.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's so cute. So cute. Mary Shelley has always been like a massive inspiration for me, not just because of her writing Frankenstein, which is my favorite Gothic piece, but just because of the life she lived and the fact that, she lost her mother while being born. And her dad went on to marry another woman who completely rejected her. So she was really left with this void of not being accepted, these feelings of rejection, which is probably why she did unfortunately get with someone like Percy, unfortunately. And then, as we know, he was a bit of a philanderer as well, and off with her stepsister even, there was no boundaries for old Percy there. And then obviously she lost her own child as well. So she just went through all these things that I looked at her and, I was kind of rejected by my own mother, had a really toxic, abusive relationship with her. I lost a pregnancy, but I kind of looked at her and I was like, she still managed to write the greatest Gothic novel of all time. So she's a real inspiration to me in the fact that she could use that mother hunger that she had to create this amazing story that reflects her own mother hunger. Because the monster in this is mothered by Victor Frankenstein. And obviously we know Victor Frankenstein's a horrible, toxic parent. So yeah, I just love everything about Mary Shelley and Frankenstein.
Now, I'm assuming you saw the Del Toro
I did, yeah.
side. And, it's a gorgeous film visually, it's
Mm.
gorgeous. But critique I have, and he's allowed to make his choices, obviously. It's his film. But adding on to what you're saying about Victor being that mother, I didn't like that in this version, Victor is almost like all evil and the creature is almost all good. Whereas in the novel, there's that sort of there's nuances there. And like I missed the part of the creature saying, like, he quotes Milton is like, better to serve in hell. I mean, better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. And he's kind of like, you want to see how bad I can get? Like I love that part in the novel. And it sort of felt like he was protecting the creature too much in the film.
Yeah, I think with Del Toro, from what I know of him, he's got a very special relationship with the creature, whether it's feeling like he kind of relates to that outcastedness of the creature. So I do completely agree with what you said. I think even though there obviously was, he did show Victor as losing his mother, and that obviously affects Victor a lot. But I don't feel like in any adaptation it's ever been explored in that way, that, this is like a generational parental trauma that, Victor has a void. He then decides that he wants to become a mother in, weird ways, and carries on that curse of not parenting a child like he should. He's like many parents, he's made the choice to reproduce, not in, the biological or natural way, but he has chosen to reproduce. And then instead of accepting his creature or his, the product of this, he's chosen to reject it. And I feel like a lot of filmmakers, Del Toro included, they just forget about that bit of the book, which I think is kind of sad, because that was Mary Shelley's whole point, almost, of writing the book. It was about her experience with motherhood, whether it was facing rejection or whether it was, wanting to bring back a dead child, in which we get that's where, the reanimation thing comes in. So yeah, it's really sad that everything has been kind of glossed over in that regards in Frankenstein. That's why I think Frankenstein needs to be directed by a woman.
Yes. Yes. Amen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just to kind of carry on that birth and that rebirth. And, not that male directors can't direct something like that, but I just feel like we need another voice on Frankenstein because it was written by a woman. Like let's get another perspective on this.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. And I know you and I mean, we have, I should mention that we have discussed Frankenstein in great detail on your What a Scream podcast. So if anyone listening to this really is like, man, I really want to hear those two talk more about Frankenstein, please feel free to go back and listen. I think we did more than one episode on
Very
Frankenstein.
Possibly, yeah, because I know
yeah,
we discussed the Robert De Niro Frankenstein, which always makes me laugh, the one with Kenneth Branagh. And we also discussed Penny Dreadful as well for a bit. So yeah.
So I don't want this to become the Frankenstein podcast, but I really want to talk about, because when I read your essay, it blew my mind when you went into The Exorcist, and I have her demon head and her normal head, but I did not pay attention to the mother watching the film. So when I read your essay, I was like, oh, there it is. So can you please explain what I'm referring to about the character of the mother in The Exorcist?
Sure. So The Exorcist is my absolute favorite horror film, absolute favorite film in general. And I saw it when I was 16 years old, and I was absolutely stunned, especially as someone who was brought up in a Catholic country in Ireland. And I'd always been really into, that, and it kind of been a bit naughty because, we shouldn't be watching this film because we're all very good Catholic girls. But as I kind of got older and kind of came to terms with my own relationship with my mother and then my relationship as a mother, I started to notice that The Exorcist had a different layer to it. And I found that I was looking at it a lot more from a motherhood point of view. And the fact that Ellen Burstyn plays this mother. And while we look at it from an outside perspective, you know, she's doing all she can to help her daughter who's possessed. You know, she's having a bit of a tough time because she's getting divorced and she's dealing with Reagan's non-existent father. But I started looking at it and I started looking at the language that she uses a lot in this film. You know, at one point she says that she's, you know, a fucking psychotic, or she's got a split personality. And she's taken her to all these doctors and they're prodding Reagan and poking Reagan. And then she decides to go to the church to help. And I know that this is a film that is about demonic possession. But if we obviously look at it subtextually, it can be seen to be a film about a struggling teenager or someone just about to become a teenager. You know, her parents have broken up. Her mom's always working. She's always left home with a babysitter. She doesn't really get attention from either of her parents. There's always people coming in and out of the house because of Mrs. McNeil being an actress. And so we can kind of see Reagan as this young girl who is acting out. You know, she obviously has mental health problems at that point. She could be quite anxious or depressed. And Chris's reaction is to go straight to doctors, straight to priests, rather than kind of sitting with her child and being like, what's wrong with you? You know, do you need to talk? That kind of, I mean, I guess maybe I'm looking at it because I do come from an Irish background where women and girls who acted out of how they were expected to act in society were placed in institutions or stuff like the Magdalene laundries. So I am looking at it as, oh God, she goes to the priest to help her crazy daughter out. So I'm like, that is like, to me, that's not good mothering. And it just reminded me of, you know, the way my mother acted when I there was one time I went to her and I was like, I'm really depressed. And she told me she was going to put me in an institution. And, you know, she threw things at me and beat me. And, you know, I really kind of connected with this. And there's so many times where I like, you know, when like help me comes up on Reagan's skin and it's literally a cry for help. And, you know, Chris McNeil just kind of goes mental and, you know, starts beating on the wall and doing everything that looks very performative rather than being like, let me be here for my daughter. Let me, you know, just the way she acts. You're just like, that is an actor. And I think that's what I called that portion of my essay. I called it The Actor. Because it just reminds me of the way toxic mothers would act about things and react to things rather than keeping the kind of welfare of their child within their primary focus. It was all about how they should react and how it makes them feel. And it's funny watching The Exorcist now because I get quite triggered by it. And I find that Chris's reactions and behavior are almost as like scary as what the actual film is meant to be scary over.
Yes. And like I said, it was enlightening for me to read that because I hadn't really paid attention to her in the way that you did. But once you brought it to my attention, I was like, oh, I see it completely, how she wants someone else to fix this. She doesn't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's all about her emotions and her feelings. And her emotions and feelings are so big.
Yeah.
There's no room for Reagan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
She really like dehumanizes Reagan as well. And she really like, obviously Reagan is presented as a monster, but because we never see it from Reagan's point of view, we're only seeing it from Chris's point of view. Reagan is monstrosized. And I feel like a lot of toxic mothers do that to their children. They really dehumanize them and they monstrosize them. You know, they're like, my children's terrible. They're monsters. They're this and that. Because we never see it from the child's point of view. It's only from the mother's point of view.
Which makes me think of another film that did this in a little more of a sympathetic way, The Babadook, where
Mm,
you do have this horrific child. I mean, we see this child and we're like, oh, my, he's holding around the ball. But as you're watching, and the mother is dealing with grief, with
mm,
profound grief. And we understand that how heavy that is. And whenever I talk about this film, I always talk about how all the shots of inside the home are in like dark blue. So it's
mm,
so heavy and depressing. But the
mm,
mom's always like in a pink nightgown. Like it's so the color palettes are so interesting.
mm,
But again, we have this child who, as we're like, oh, this child, maybe he's possessed, maybe he's whatever, he's horrible, he's awful.
mm.
But then as the film's progressing, you're like, Mom, like the call's coming from inside the house. Mom is feeding the Babadook,
Mm,
her energy,
yeah.
and she's projecting it all on it. I'm not saying the kid's not a nightmare. He is, but she projects a lot onto him. And,
Mm,
but I feel like much more sympathetically than The Exorcist, because we understand, like, she's a single mom, she's working, she's tired, we get it. We get sort of why he is kind of keeping him at arm's length.
yeah. I really love The Babadook. I think it's such a fantastic portrayal of motherhood in general, whether, it is about grief or when I first came to it, I was dealing with postnatal depression. And I found that The Babadook was a really good metaphor for depression,
Mhm.
and
Right.
postnatal. And then I love films that grow with you, and I feel like this film has grown with me. So
Mhm.
my son has autism,
Mhm.
and I kind of feel like there's glimmers of the sun in the Babadook, perhaps having additional needs. And
Yeah.
it's just the experience of a mother that has to fight for her child to be, treated well by schools, by other children, by other parents, while also dealing with her own mental health. And I
Mhm.
guess it's quite symbolic of a lot of parents that they have to fight for their children to have, a good life and to be accepted and to be helped when they need help, while also dealing with their own mental health problems and trying to, keep them in check. And I just always find that it's such a wonderful metaphor, that whole film of like, if you try to ignore something, if you try to push something away, especially when it's your own mental health and your own depression, especially as a parent, it will only come back bigger. And really what you have to do is like not feed your depression in a bad way, but feed it as in accept it, acknowledge it, do things that will help it. And while it may always be there, as in the ending of the film where she's got to feed the Babadook and then, everything's okay, as long as you face it head on and you kind of nourish yourself and every part of you, whether that is your depression or anxiety, that you can be a good parent for your child. And I just think Jennifer Kent, I'm just like bow
Yes,
down to her because I think she's done the most amazing job at capturing that.
we love her. Yes.
Mm,
But I would almost argue with you. I feel like you're being a little generous in saying parent,
okay.
because I feel like the responsibility for these things, at least when my kids were coming up, and my kids are grown adults now,
Hmm.
is on the mother. It's always like, what's the mother doing? What can the mother do? Even if dad's right there. Now, in the Babadook, he's not. He's
Mm,
absent. But even if dad's right there, it's always, they always look at mom. Like, what
hmm.
are you doing? How are you helping this? How are you helping the child? How are you making this work? I mean, they ask, as a working mother, you get asked constantly, well, how do you balance that? How do you make it
Hmm.
work? Working and family. Men are never asked that.
Yeah.
One goes up to a male CEO of a company and says, how do you spend time with your kids?
Yeah.
Nobody cares because they're not expected to.
Yeah, yeah. I do feel like the onus is on women a lot when it comes to, being the primary caregiver. And, women are expected a lot to kind of push their own things aside and to not, a lot of women say that when they have their children, they lose their personality. They can't remember what makes them them. Um, I was really lucky in the regard that my husband really made sure that when we had Nate, that he made sure that I kept up my hobbies. He was really good at that, and he is really good. He's really good at, like, I mean, a lot of it does fall on me because, you know, whatever, but he's really good at making sure that some, you know, a lot of the time equal. But it's funny because, like, even with like Nate's school friends' parents, they're like, wow, Oscar's really involved with Nate. And I'm like, yeah, it's half his kid. Of course he is. Like,
He's throwing a parade. I mean, my God.
like, why would he not be involved with his kid? Like,
Oh,
bizarre. But yeah, I do feel like, and we see it a lot, don't we? Like, we see in a lot of horror films, whether it was like Smile or Lights Out, that the mother is, it's always the mother's responsibility for the children, even when they're grown up. So in like Smile and Lights Out, we see children of mothers that have mental health problems. And this, you know, it results in like demonic activity, say. And it's always like, when it's the mother's fault because the mother had mental health problems. So in the Lights Out and Smile, not to spoil it for anyone, but it turns out both mothers were either like bipolar or schizophrenic, very depressed. And the whole thing, the whole demons, all the demons and all the ghosts, it's all the mother's fault. And you just think, like, really?
Yeah, like,
where's Dad at this? Like, and it's so funny because I wrote an article a couple of years ago about mental health and parents in horror films. And it took me so long. I could name off any amount of like horror films that depict maternal mental health, but I could only find one or two that depicted paternal mental health that wasn't like anger or, you know, because we've got like The Shining and stuff like that where we see like an angry, abusive father, but we don't have many that are like, you know, the dad was depressed.
And I'm sure.
Yeah. The one that I kind of talked about in this article was Kill List, which is like a British folk horror. And it's about a dad has a post-traumatic stress disorder from serving abroad in Kosovo. But other than that, like, it's always like the mum was schizophrenic, the mum was manically depressed, the mum has, you know, bipolar disorder, and that's why her kids are messed up, you know. So it's very telling of how society looks at women and mothers as the sole responsible person for children.
Which leads me into the last film you mentioned, which I'm like bouncing around in my chair to talk about, which is Hereditary. Oh God, I love that movie.
I love it so much. I do.
Much. And I just have to tell you, and the audience has already heard this as people who are following me. I talk about the snub club sometimes, like people are snubbed for awards.
Yeah.
Me, the godmother of horror, who never gets an award.
Oh, I've never got an award either. So,
well, that makes me feel, you want to join the snub club?
Yeah, let's give each other awards.
It's going to be us, Toni Collette.
Okay. Yeah.
Jesse Plemons for Begonia.
Yeah. I get that.
Snubbed. But let's let that go. I'm moving on.
Big deep breath.
And Hereditary. Oh my God. So the mother in this film, it's so dangerous. But again, dealing with grief, dealing with generational trauma. But again, through the maternal line, conveniently so.
Yeah.
But this is such a powerful film for me. And again, I always feel like you could remove. I love the supernatural stuff. It's incredibly scary and thrilling, but you could remove it and now have a great film about this family and how do they deal with grief and how do they deal with mental illness, and how do you deal with the mother? How do you deal with this mom?
Yeah. I love her. So when I first watched Hereditary, I was kind of like, meh, you know, I can take it or leave it. But then on each subsequent watch, I think I've watched this film about 5 times. I love it even more. So we get, I mean, it's exactly what it is. It's intergenerational trauma. I think Ari Aster is so great. As much as I give out about I'm kind of sick of trauma and I'm sick of generational trauma, blah, 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 at the moment in horror. I feel like Ari Aster does it so well,
Oh my God.
so well that I can give him a pass for it.
Mhm.
But in Hereditary, we see Annie, who is played by Toni Collette, and she is fully aware of how toxic her mother was and how toxic their relationship was and how that trauma has been put,
Yeah.
you know, she goes to a grief counseling group. She talks about it. She's like, I feel sorry for my mother.
Yeah.
However, she fucked up with me.
Mhm.
And I love that self-awareness. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of people of our generation do have that self-awareness now that they can be like, I feel bad for my parents and what they went through. However, I don't want to be like them. I want to break that cycle. And she is very caring about her children. She, you know, makes sure she looks after them. She keeps on top of Charlie's peanut allergy. Like she's very but then obviously we see this massive traumatic event happen. And instead of, you know, dealing with the aid that she has, so like, you know, the grief group, or isn't her husband's a therapist as well,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
instead of using those aids, she decides to just go back to what she knows and what's comfortable, which is that generational trauma.
Mhm.
So she's horrible to her son Peter. Like she screams at him over dinner, tells
Yeah.
him that he can't take responsibility, when in actual fact she should have been the one to take responsibility, and she's kind of deflecting her guilt onto him.
There's a moment, I don't mean to interrupt you, there's a moment during that screaming where she says, that fucking face on your face.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, I know that's part of demonic. I know there was a supernatural, but to me, watching it through this lens of mother hunger, it's her saying, I see this trauma in you. Like I
Yeah.
see you repeating the script
Yeah.
that I wanted
Exactly.
so badly to not happen again.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And then, so it's funny because my sympathies in the beginning are very much with Annie, and
Mhm.
I very much relate to her, and I'm very, you know, really cheering her on and whatever. But then halfway through the film, when this starts happening, my sympathies then flip on to Peter,
Mhm.
who literally a crown is placed on his head for him to carry on the trauma of his family. And I just think it's such a great film. Like,
It's such
it's
a
amazing.
well, like now I'm like, I'm gonna go watch it.
Yeah, yeah,
Really. But like you, every time I watch it, like something new comes up and I'm like, oh my God,
yeah,
I like see that the first time I didn't even really, it is.
yeah,
It's such a complex film, such a beautiful film.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I think like I named this section of my essay The Ghost. And I
Mhm.
think it's just, you know, when we choose to carry on with, you know, have children or whatever, we really do have the ghosts of our foremothers standing behind us. And I think, you know, like is it the bit at the end where they're placing the crown on Peter's head and there's like Annie with her head chopped off and the grandmother as well. And it's this whole line of like, it's just like he's so good at symbolism.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
it's just amazing. Such a good
Brilliant. I want to switch gears mainly because my interest years and years and years ago, I did something on the image of mothers in fairy tales, which really was about more about stepmothers than mothers. 'Cause
Mm,
remember your fairy tales, the mothers tend to die. And
yeah.
then the young girl, when she hits puberty, is in danger. And stepmom is usually right behind that danger. So I want to talk about Bring Her Back, where we have a foster mom. We don't have a mom. We have a foster mom. But we do have two children who they're not really children, they're teens, they're adolescents who are feeling that sort of mother hunger. They've been neglected. Now they're in the foster system. They are just, and I love the relationship between the siblings in this movie, how much they care for each other and try to protect each other. Really, I found it
Mhm.
warming. But I found the foster mom, she's amazing in terms
Mm,
of, to me, sort of like narcissistic mom who will just love bomb you, but then, she'll turn around and be very, very passive aggressive or set you up. Like she kept setting up
mm,
the boy constantly, she kept emasculating him constantly. because she wanted the girl. Like, I was like, whoa, this is almost, again, like a blueprint for the narcissistic mother personality. What were your thoughts on Bring Her?
I didn't mind it. I didn't like it as much as the Filippo brothers' previous film, Talk to Me. Like, I love that film.
A lot of people talked to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with Bring Her Back, it came out at a time where I was, like I said, just really fatigued by like trauma and grief. And I was just like, oh God, not another one. It's got fantastic visceral violence in it, that I really appreciate, being a fan of like gore and, you know, splatter and whatever. But yeah, as a mother, I felt like as the mother in that, yeah, it was very typical of, you know, narcissistic mothers, and kind of they're so desperate to get what they want that they don't care whether they destroy everything around them. And the fact that it's more like, it was very indicative of like hurt people. Obviously she was like grieving really badly from an accident, which was like pretty much her fault because she wasn't keeping an eye on her daughter. And instead of sitting with that grief, sitting with that guilt and go to therapy. I mean, therapy can solve a lot. We wouldn't have half the horror films we do. If people went to horror. Yeah, if people just went to therapy, we wouldn't have half the horror films we do. But yeah, instead of going to therapy, which, you know, a lot of narcissistic mothers don't do because they feel like they don't need therapy, she then in turn hurts children more. So yeah, like looking at it from that point of view, it is a really good kind of display of the behaviors of a toxic mother. But at the same time, I think I'm a bit over trauma.
No, I get it. I get it. Yes. I have those moments too where I'm like, let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
And then I sort of have a confession. When you and I were trying to set up this little chat, I was thinking about movies with mothers and motherhood and horror. And the one movie that really made me look at my own biases about mother and my own assumptions, motherhood, was Sarah the Bone Woman.
Okay, yeah.
Where I did not like the ending of that film.
Fair enough. Okay.
Very disappointed with it. And then I get, like you said, I had to sit with myself and say, well, why? Was it something in the script?
Yeah.
That made me say, oh, that shouldn't have happened? No. When you watch it, the ending makes perfect sense. It was more my assumptions of why is this woman not just embracing motherhood? Why is she not glowing and dewy like the women in the commercials who are running through fields of daffodils? And, you know, instead she made a very realistic choice, a rational choice. But, you know, so it was kind of like another epiphany for me. Where I was like, wow, I didn't realize I was carrying that misogyny inside of me. Until I saw this film, and then I was like, okay, I need to be more generous in my assumptions, or have these assumptions, and realize that motherhood and parenting is different for everybody. My children were not planned; they were a complete surprise. Whereas hers in the film, it seemed like they wanted the child at first, you know, and so, you know, again, I was sort of like putting this box around her of like, well, you should just be like, oh, everything for the baby, not me, you know? And
yeah. I guess like I love Who is Sarah, like absolutely adore this film. I think it's fantastic portrayal of breaking those norms and society's expectations of what mothers should be. Like, you know, like you said, like how many, you know, it was like even when I was pregnant, people were like, are you excited? And I was like, no. No, not at all. I hate pregnancy. Pregnancy is disgusting.
It's hard. It is
absolute gross. And again, it kind of touches on that thing of like, well, you know, is a woman expected to just become this personality-less, you know, hobbyless person?
It's vessel for this.
Yeah. Identity, you know, no identity apart from mother. In Who is Sarah, we see this woman, before she, settles down and becomes pregnant. She's, a queer punk, and she loves going to like punk shows, and she's real like, anarchy kind of. And then, she loves doing her woodwork. The woodwork is a big thing for her. And then when she settles down, she has to turn her workshop into a nursery, and everyone's like, you're a mother now, and you have to be great with children, and you're now in a hetero relationship, and you can't have a queer identity because you're with a straight man. And she's haunted by that, and she's haunted about her anxiety about being a mom. And I think the ending, initially I was like, why would she do that? Like, why? But I think, again, it's this kind of metaphor for sometimes you have to step away from the identity of mother to discover who you are in order to perhaps become a better mother. I think, obviously, at the end, it's kind of left a bit open. We don't know whether sorry for spoilers, but we don't know whether she returns to being a mother or that's it for her. But I think the main takeaway from Who is Sarah for me was, you have to have your own identity to be a good mother. Like you can't, I don't know, something about letting your kids see that all you are is a mother is quite depressing, really. I'd hate it if someone asked Nate, like, what does your mother do? And he was like, I don't know, she's just me ma. Like, I'd hate that. Whereas I know that if they were like, what does your ma do? He'd be like, well, she watches a lot of horror films. She talks about dinosaurs a lot. Like, she...
Which is great. No, and I can remember because you bring up the woodworking, it's almost like no matter what we create as women, it's not as important as creating a child, no matter what kind of art we create. And I can remember when my son, he just 30, but when he was like 5, the same thing. He was like, what did you want to be when you grew up, Mom? And I was like, a writer. He said, oh, a writer. And I thought, he doesn't know that about me. He doesn't know. Now both my children are very involved in my writing. Like he does my website and does like sort of the business end of it because he doesn't trust me. And he should not. Not because one time
smart boy.
he like joined me at a con and he's like, how have sales been going? I'm like, oh no, I'll count the books later. He's like, no. No, I'm big.
Yeah.
And my daughter's done like covers for me. She's an artist as well. She's a beautiful artist, and she does some covers and done, logos and things. For the Godmother logo is hers. So they're very involved. But I remember that feeling of like, yeah, he doesn't know me as someone who has a creative life.
Yeah.
And I need to change. And I was like, I need to change that now. He needs to understand.
Yeah.
That mom does these other things.
Yeah. I think it's that thing, and I know this is going to sound really selfish, but it's that thing that once a woman has a child, they're expected to always put that child first. And I agree to a point, when it comes to safeguarding, when it comes to nourishment, to bringing up your child, yes, your child should come first. But sometimes you should come first, especially when it comes to like your mental well-being and your psychological health. And like, there's times where like, Nate's doing me head in and I'm, having a tough time. And I'm like, you know what? You need to go somewhere else. And I need to either go watch a really horrible horror film, or I need to go for a run, or I need to or I just say to Oscar, you need to be home and I just need to go out. Like, I'm not taking this weight on because it's too much. And I need to there was, that old ad, fill your cup before you fill other people's. Put your own oxygen mask on before you put on your child's. Because how can you be a good parent if you're running on empty? You can't. It's impossible. And I just feel like, there's a lot of expectation on women to run on empty because they've given everyone else.
Well, I'm so proud of you I'm so proud of me for doing that, because I never learned that. It's not till now when I'm thinking about maybe someday I'll be a grandmother that I'm thinking about that. And I'm thinking about that in terms of my daughter and my son's partner. I want to be there for them so that they can say, I need a break. Can you, and how can I support them? Support their mental health, because I did always put mine on the back burner. I did. And now I think back on that and think that might not have been the best thing, because I might have lost patience at times with
Yeah.
that.
Mm.
So I'm glad
Yeah.
that you are very aware of that. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just having that self-awareness, isn't it? And I think that's what a lot of our kind of people before us didn't have, that sort of awareness that you
Yeah.
can look after yourself. You
No,
don't have to always be looking after other people.
you and I have discussed women's health is shamefully
Mm.
uninvestigated. Mental health, physical health, things like, I mean, they didn't even know about postpartum depression
Mm.
till very recently. It was sort of like, oh no, that,
Yeah.
like,
You just got the baby blues. You're
yeah,
fine.
whatever. And you're like, oh, this is a very real
Yeah.
thing, and I've been going through perimenopause, which,
Mm.
everybody's kind of like, because it's
Yeah.
why is it like, and
Yeah.
you go to your GYN, they're like, we don't know.
Yes.
We don't know. Oh, okay.
Great.
You bring any other films you would like to mention before we wrap things up? Any films like this? Since you wrote this essay, has something come out that you've been like, oh darn, I wish this had been released when I was writing that essay, so I could have included? Is there anything? It's okay to say no.
I guess Long Legs is another is a great film for kind of, there's a little bit of a thing on motherhood in the fact that the main character's mother has to do these horrific things in order to protect her daughter that aren't necessarily great. And I guess, again, that's that kind of thing of like, everyone thinks they're doing their best, but you're probably going to screw up your kid. Like, even now, I'm like, I have broken generational trauma, and I have, tried to do my best with Nate, but he's probably going to be in therapy as well. Like, he's like,
okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Exactly. That's okay. So that would be a good film to look at from the lens of motherhood. But nothing, nothing has really struck out to me since Who is Sarah? Like, it hasn't really struck me. Another kind of subject with motherhood that I find in horror is the kind of final mother in horror films. Like, we've had, like the final girls and blah, blah, blah. But like, what happens when they grow up and we get the final mother?
I love that. I love watching these final girls aging into mothers and grandmothers with Jamie Lee Curtis. I loved in Halloween when she comes out with the gray hair and is like, let's go.
Yeah. So I really like seeing that archetype, whether we see it in, even Ellen in Aliens, Annabelle in Mama, even Wendy from The Shining. Like, they're all examples of like mothers who have to fight for their lives and their children's lives. It's a real primal kind of archetype. So if you wanted some positive representation of mothers in horror, then I would go for the final mother archetype.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we were a little bit negative. So yeah, those people are the ones you can put behind and stand in their power.
Yeah.
Right along with them. So before we end, where can people follow you? Where can people, like, I know you have your Gore podcast and things going on. Mention some places where people might follow you.
Well, so you can find me on Instagram at What a Scream. And then I also have my website, whatascreampodcast.com, where I do like reviews and articles and all that. I have my podcast with my co-host Brad Hanson called Gore Things, in which we discuss splatter and really disgusting, gory cinema, ranging from stuff like Evil Dead to more extreme underground stuff like Grotesque or the Guinea Pig series. So there's a little bit of something for everyone in that.
I've listened to it and I enjoy it.
And you can find us like wherever you listen to podcasts. And we've also got a Patreon as well, where we've done franchise deep dives into like Hellraiser and Saw and Chucky. And we've also done like a little mini series on penis trauma in cinema, just for some fun. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time, and it was lovely to see you again. I'm going to sign us off now with my little music leading us out. So, and thank you everybody for listening.